I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 12 novels of crime fiction. The newest, The First to Lie, just got a starred review from Publishers Weekly. And my previous book, The Murder List, won the Anthony Award for Best Novel of the Year. I'm so pleased today to be interviewing Matt Coyle, whose seventh Rick Cahill novel is just out, called Blind Vigil. And it is a terrific, terrific book. Let me tell you a little bit about Matt Coyle. He's the author of the best-selling Rick Cahill novels. He knew he wanted to be an author when he was 14, and his father gave him The Simple Art of Murder by Raymond Chandler. His first novel, Yesterday's Echo, won the Anthony for Best Novel, and every single one of his next 5 books won or was nominated for one of the major awards in crime fiction. So I'm thrilled to be talking with you today, Matt, about Blind Vigil, your 7th Rick Cahill novel. You can easily read this as a standalone, even though it's part of a series. And I truly loved it. You are fast-paced, compelling. I love Rick Cahill. I love the whole milieu. Where did Rick Cahill come from in your brain?
Yeah, thanks for the nice words, and congrats on the Anthony. We don't do conferences anymore, so we don't get to see each other. And I was really looking forward to BoucherCon Sacramento, and congrats again. I don't know how many Anthonys you won, but there's quite a few.
Well, you know, it is interesting because when you won for your first novel, that was your big step into crime fiction and sort of an indication of how wonderful your career was going to be. And you were so on the way. And Rick Cahill was part of that first novel as well. So how did he blossom in your brain?
Right. I've told the story a few times, but hopefully people won't mind. It took me 10 years to get published for Yesterday's Echo, and I was revising it, and through one early revision, I didn't have a real good feel for the character yet, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I was writing my first book. I wasn't in writers groups. I was writing what I call the cocoon, where it's just you. And during a revision, a line came to me out of the ethers of my subconscious, which was the first time I saw her. She made me remember, and she made me forget. And that became the first sentence to Yesterday's Echo. And with that sentence, I realized there was, this guy was much darker than I've been writing. His life had been that way, much darker. And it really helped me get into his backstory much more. So I wanted a character who was dark, and as I learned him, darker. But I wanted to be an ex-cop, which is a bit of a trope. But I also wanted him to be something very bad happened. His past was suspected of his wife's murder. He was arrested. He was released but never exonerated, and all the way up until this book, Blind Vigil, he's thought to be a guy who, or the book before, he's thought to be a guy who got away with murdering his wife. So I wanted to have that dark cloud over his entire career. And he was a cop. He went back down to San Diego, worked in a restaurant in the first book, and became a private eye. So that's where he is all later with Blind Vigil.
I mean, it's interesting because the title, Yesterday's Echo, of your first book is so evocative of what the story is about. And Blind Vigil, again, you've chosen in Blind Vigil to have Rick Cahill not be able to see. Now, Matt, that is a risk, you know, when an author has to use all 5 senses for the book. It's such a rule of writing. And so what you've done is take away one of the senses. How did you decide to do that?
Well, at the end of Lost Tomorrows, the 6th book, something happened to Rick that had huge repercussions. And obviously, he lost his eyesight. And as I was writing and realizing how difficult it was to write a guy who's blind, and unfortunately I've never been blind. Not only that, but he has to investigate a case with help. And I was thinking the whole time, why the hell don't you just make him like in between the last book and this book, his vision came back. I mean, that was the easy out. But I thought, for one thing, I always try to take the hard way in writing. I don't need any other part of my life, but in writing, I always like to take the difficult way. But the other thing was, if I had him, like he was blind to the end of the book, and then his vision comes back, I thought, well, then you've lost the real impact of what happened to him. You've negated this real thing that's happened to him in the book and lessened it. And I didn't think that was fair. So, but believe me, I cursed myself every day.
No, I bet you did.
I see.
But you know what happened when as you're cursing yourself, you're also sort of raising the bar on yourself. I mean, you're tapping in to your other senses, just like Rick does in the book, heightened other senses, to have you be able to write a book. I mean, I've never read anything like this before, where you're closing your eyes to see what Rick sees instead of opening your eyes to see what Rick sees. When you began to see that it was working, what did you think about that?
Well, I got to tell you, it took me a long time to believe that it was working. As a matter of fact, and every Rick book has been straight first person, no other point of view. I was so unsure that I could make it compelling enough to be this vision impaired character as a private investigator when I can't describe scenes with my vision. That I had the bad guy in third person, where he was a third person character, and I would drop him in about every 4 chapters or so, roughly. I did it probably for the first 120 pages of my first draft. And then I just kind of clicked in. I mean, I really liked what I wrote in that third person. It gives me hope that I'll in third person someday. But I just said, this is a Rick book. It's got to be in Rick's head, and you're gonna have to figure it out. You can't take. And once again, I thought the third person point of view guy was a cheap out for me for a Rick book. So I just went after like 100 or so pages. I said, well, I just continued to write Rick chapters. I didn't really think I'm pulling this guy out. And then about half the way through the book, I said, well, it's got to be Rick first person all the way.
It's interesting because I remember talking to Steve Hamilton once about The Lock Artist. And I said, why did you decide to have a character who doesn't talk? And he said, well, I really actually didn't decide that. He just didn't talk. And I think it's so fascinating how Rick's blindness emerges from the book. I mean, plus you're so clever about how you still paint a picture for the reader of what's going on. You have people describe it to him, the scenes, and he's grateful. Thank you for telling me exactly that I'm 15 steps away or 4 parking spaces away. And the heightened sense of smell, where he smells someone's deodorant, for instance, which has such a noticeable fragrance, and he recognizes that, and he builds his own vision of a character from his sense of smell. Did you practice that? Did you research that? Did you walk around with a blindfold to see what it would be like?
I did research. I talked to 2 women who had lost their eyesight as adults. One was when she lost her eyesight, and I actually dedicated the book to her. And the other one is a woman who's she's older, and she lost her eyesight in her 40s. And so, which was good for what I was looking for, because obviously Rick lost his eyesight when he was about 40. So they gave me, here's the thing, they gave me some great insight, but also, I'm sure I got stuff wrong, and I'll feel badly about that. So I wanted the book to be not an example of what these people go through, of what vision impaired people go through. It's what Rick, this flawed character, goes through, and the way he deals with it. But anyway, yes, I actually bought a seeing eye cane. There's a service cane, and I would walk out. I would wait till it was night, and I would walk outside a little bit, working with it, because I didn't want to see people. Didn't want to have people see me and think I was goofing around. But yeah, and it's funny though. The house thing. And the counting thing, I try. There's not a whole lot of the counting thing, but it's just in the beginning and a couple other parts where Rick is counting steps. And I pulled that out of my imagination. Then later, when I was talking to one of the vision impaired people, she said, yeah, that's something that she used to do. But it's funny, if you close your eyes and walked around your house, you'd probably be okay. You'd probably have a good idea where things are. But of course, outside, it's a whole different deal. And then there's technology, that can really help vision impaired people. So I didn't go too deeply into that, and I didn't want to get that wrong. So I had Rick being a little bit like, for instance, Braille. He hadn't really given in to the point where he's going to start to learn to read Braille, because he hadn't fully
accepted,
conceived that he was going to be blind for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and that hope always, that hope that he has in the book that he might get his vision back is so poignant and so touching, because he really does is realistic about it, how the doctors tell him that you might think you see light, but it's probably not true. It's a trick of the light. It's a trick of your brain. It's a trick of your nerves.
Right.
The other thing about the Rick's reaction to it is understanding, his psychological understanding about how the world deals with him differently when they realize that he can't see. That people who may be aggressive or say get out of my way, when they realize he can't see, they suddenly change too.
Right, which is something he's not used to.
Yeah,
he's not used to people. He's a little abrasive himself, so he's not used to people. He says at one point, showing him grace because he feels like he hasn't shown enough grace in his life. Yeah. So, but also because he's at one point investigating and he's trying not to get in the way of his partner. Yeah. He kind of made a mistake by getting out of the car at one point. He's like, I'm a neon light, neon sign. And I don't, someone who they're pursuing, happens to know that there's somebody that's blind. And so he's got to be very, very careful about being that neon sign.
I mean, it's interesting because as a private detective, he's used to blending in, and now he realizes he can't do that anymore. And Right. It's quite a moment for him. I mean, talk about Rick for a second, because, your character, this is a page-turning, suspenseful, surprising mystery, a really unputdownable book, as they say. But the key of it is Rick. The key of it is his reaction to the world, his desire to make things right. We know he loves his dog, so we know we like him. But has he changed as you're writing him? How do you deal with who Rick is, and how do you make that work?
Right, he has changed, and yeah, I do always try to start with characters. So obviously, I'm writing in first person, so characters king. But he has changed, and it's a little bit of a roller coaster in some ways. Each book gets progressively darker, actually. And the last book before this, Lost Tomorrows, he's in a very, very dark place when he's trying to discover finally who had killed his wife many years before. And he's always had the sense of he lives by his father's code, which is sometimes you have to do what's right even when the law says it's wrong. And he starts to question himself, and at the end of the last book is, do I even know right from wrong anymore? How am I different from someone who, does things for bad reasons because they think they're doing right? So he starts to question that. But so in this book, though, and he's been a lone wolf. He does have a partner, Moira McFarlane, he works with occasionally. But he's a lone wolf. He's lived by his own code, but now he's got a very serious relationship with a woman, Leah Landingham. And he's now blind, and he needs help. That's not to say everyone who's vision impaired needs help, but Rick's in early stages, especially if he's going to try to help investigate a case. He needs help from people. So that's a whole different place for him to be in. And it actually opens him up a little bit to being more vulnerable. I mean, he's always been vulnerable internally, but externally, he asks people for help now, which for him is a huge change.
Well, it shows you also how devoted he is to his job as a detective. He tries to stay away from it, and he can't do that. I love this book, and as the pages progressed, I almost sneaked to the end to see how it ended because it was so suspenseful that I just couldn't stand it. I thought, well, if I just go to the end and see what happens, and then I'll go back to the middle and read it from the middle. But I didn't do that. I didn't do that because I respect you as an author, and I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. But did you know how it would end when you were writing it?
Yes, to a degree. I always have a target. I'm a blank pager or a pantser, as we say. I always have a target, and I actually didn't know when I started the book. I didn't know who the killer was, and I didn't know some of the greater plot things going on. But I knew probably that scene. Not the very end. Well, actually, I didn't really, there's an epilogue too. All my books have epilogues. I didn't know the epilogue when I was writing it, and I didn't know the I didn't know. I don't want to give too much away, but I've got a character who can't see.
Oh.
dealing with something where he's got to come up against somebody, and I didn't know how I was going to make that work, and then I did, and then the epilogue, which is kind of a more touching scene, just came to me as I was writing the book.
How did it feel to write that?
It felt really good. Because I was, once again, I don't want to give anything away, but there's a character who is not really known that well, but is sort of the inciting incident. And as I was writing her, there was a lot of different points of view. And I as I got to know her better, I wanted to make sure that she was given her full justice, and people knew who she really was, because she didn't know that as the book was progressing. So I really wanted to have that, because I really got to like her as I went along.
I mean, you've been so successful in all your books, and I know Blind Vigil will also be a huge success. Has it gotten easier to write? I mean, you must know that this is a terrific book.
Oh,
Was
thanks.
it easier to write than your others?
No, it's hard. It seems harder to me each time, and I get messier, I get more organic, as I'll say, messier. But I have in the back of my mind, well, you've done this before, so somehow you're going to figure it out. But as I'm writing it, I all think they're horrible, and then I read the first draft and go, it's not that horrible, and then I revise and revise where I can stand it.
And when you opened the box of Blind Vigil, what did you think?
Oh, I was stoked. I love the cover, by the way. Yeah, I was. That's a great day. As you, thanks, Hank. As you know, with your 13 books, it's just a great day when and it's been a while too. You turn the book in a year before, and then it's really great to see it. And then you think, wow, this is really going to happen.
Well, let me wrap up by saying, it says on your official bio, Matt lives in San Diego with his yellow lab, Angus, where he is writing his 8th crime novel. How are you doing on it?
I'm turning it in at the end of the week.
Yay. Congratulations, Matt. This is a terrific book, and it's been just a joy to talk with you. And I can't wait for everyone to read Blind Vigil.
Thanks, Hank. I really appreciate it. Coming for you means a lot. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.